Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new, I'm Holly and today I'm going to be sharing with you my baby loss story. I don't want to panic anybody because obviously I am pregnant at the minute. I am not talking about the baby that is in my belly right now. This baby is healthy and completely safe and fine. I am actually talking about my daughter that passed away almost 3 years ago. So I've actually been wanting to film this video for quite some time now. It's a story I felt really kind of was a big part of my story, and especially when I'm doing pregnancy updates and I'm talking a lot about being pregnant after a baby loss. Even though this is not my rainbow baby, I do have a rainbow baby as well after Silver, which she is 20 months old and very healthy and well. But I felt like a lot of the experiences I've had over this last pregnancy and indeed in my rainbow pregnancy were affected by the loss that I suffered and that we as a family suffered. And so as much as I did used to do a lot of blogging, I now find it a lot easier to do the vlogging and a lot more personal. And so I want to go back to the beginning and share exactly what happened in my baby loss journey with Silver Rose. So I know this is not going to be a super short video. It is probably going to be a little bit more lengthy than some of my other videos, but that is only because this journey was not an instant incident. It was a progressive illness and something that took a lot of time, from during my pregnancy and then losing her actually when she was a neonatal. So this is actually my neonatal loss story and not a stillbirth story or a miscarriage story. It was to a certain degree an expected loss. So yeah, it was just a very long drawn out process, and I'm going to share with you guys exactly what happened and the whole story. So on that note, I would suggest that you probably go and get yourself a cuppa, pause this video, go get yourself a drink, sit comfortably, and hopefully you will at least take something from this video and maybe find it relatable. I would be really interested to know actually if anybody has experienced a similar situation to myself, because we found that her condition and what happened to her was so incredibly rare, which made it incredibly difficult for treating her. And it would just be interesting to know if anyone else has had an experience with this. But I have got my coffee, so I am ready to start and go through this journey with you. So we always knew that we wanted more than one child, and we were very lucky to have our son Beau, and he is now 4 years old. And he was actually conceived after a very early miscarriage, so he was actually our first rainbow baby. And then towards when he was about 6 months old, we decided we wanted to start trying again. I started weaning him with breastfeeding, and I was still breastfeeding but not as much, and obviously we were introducing solid foods, so my cycle returned and we started trying. And I think it was about 2 days before his first birthday that we got the positive test, and we were expecting again, and we were so over the moon. We took all these exciting announcement pictures. Yeah, we were just over the moon and so excited to have a sibling for him that was going to be close in his age as well. Quickly this pregnancy then went south. Unfortunately I got very bad morning sickness, which I didn't have with Beau at all, not really. The nausea was so intense and it made for a very miserable first trimester. I was pretty much in bed most of the first trimester. It was, in that sense, compared to even like I'm on pregnancy number 4 now, it was the worst pregnancy for morning sickness. And unfortunately that then implicated on my mental well-being, which I already have mental health problems. I generally have had depression in the past. I have anxiety that has been long-standing, and I do have a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And unfortunately I did have mild prenatal depression with Bo, and during this pregnancy with Silver I did get prenatal depression as a result of just dealing with feeling so unwell all the time. So I had a really unsupportive midwife unfortunately in this pregnancy, and I did actually go to her one day after I think I'd had my 12-week scan, and I'd obviously seen baby wriggling around that morning, and she was so active. I remember her like kicking off the walls and pushing. I couldn't feel anything, but I could see on the screen that she was just a very active little baby, and it was such a special moment. And then I went to my midwife appointment later on that day, and I spoke to her about how I emotionally felt, and she suggested that I terminate based on the fact that I was suffering prenatal depression. She didn't want to offer any support, she didn't try to support me. And then when I said that I was suicidal, which I still can't wrap my head around, and I can tell you now I'm so thankful that she is not a midwife anymore, thank God, because I just feel sorry for anyone that would ever be under her care. But basically when I said I felt suicidal and stuff, she then threatened me with social services saying I was putting the baby at harm, but she just suggested that I terminate that baby anyway. And it just makes me so angry when I think I did obviously lose this baby, and it just feels like she got what she wanted, that she put it out there, and she was the first one to ever suggest that I would ever terminate a healthy, happy baby, which she was at the time. She was perfectly healthy at 12 weeks, and I still hold this anger that I find hard to really let go. And I haven't had any bereavement counselling. I've just only recently got accepted to get some bereavement counselling, so hopefully I can talk through that with bereavement counselling. But yeah, at that time I had a really healthy baby and just a really awful midwife, and I did then request for a different midwife, which she was absolutely amazing, and especially considering how the pregnancy then progressed, she really looked after me, which is so important. And basically I started to feel better in terms of sickness during this pregnancy at around 18 weeks, and I remember specifically that I had this feeling that this baby was a girl. And so I remember we went to the Sainsbury's Christmas sale of toys, and it was the first time I'd bought anything for the baby, and I bought two little things that were both pink. But for the first time I felt hopeful, and I started to not feel sick, and I was really starting to it was like the first time I was starting to feel good about the pregnancy. And a week later, at 19 weeks, we had the 20-week scan. It's really hard for me to actually film this video because for so long I've put all of this stuff, it's almost like I've put it in a box, and I don't like to think about it. I'm so scared of forgetting her, but at the same time I don't want to remember the pain. And even to this day, that pain and that loss impacts the way I parent my children now. I'm always worried, and I'm like wanting to wrap them in bubble wrap because I'm so scared of losing them all the time, and it's made me such a paranoid, anxious mum, and it almost takes the enjoyment out of the fact that I have like my rainbow babies. But Bo went with us to the 20-week scan at 19 weeks, and it was on the Friday, and he was in the pram, and he was like really desperately not misbehaving, but he just really wanted to be out, and he was at that age where he was just very fidgety. And I guess I could kind of tell that something was wrong that day because she scanned me 3 times. She got me to move positions, she got me to go empty my bladder, then she got us to go for a 10-minute walk and go back. And we were trying to, I still remember, we were trying to like feed Bo crisps, that like a packet of crisps that we'd found in the car. When I remember walking around the car park at the hospital saying that I thought something was wrong and that I couldn't understand why we were having to do all that stuff. And she really struggled actually to get a photo desperately because we found out that there was like pretty much no amniotic fluid. It had all disappeared, which I hadn't been leaking at all, so we didn't know where it had gone. So it was really difficult. It's really difficult when you're trying to scan a baby and there's no fluid. The fluid actually helps the clarity of the picture. We did get one picture from that scan, and I still remember the fact that we went into that scan saying, oh, you know, we don't want to find out the gender and we wanted it to be a surprise. And I'm kind of gutted that we never asked her desperately to check, because then the ordeal we went through to actually find out her gender, it took a long time, and we were still saying, oh, the baby and it and stuff, when then obviously it got to the point where we knew there was a very unwell baby. So yeah, at the end of the scan she told me and Fabian that the kidneys seemed abnormal, the baby was really small, and I don't know if she mentioned the lungs being small as well. I asked her, I still remember asking her, do you think this baby's going to live? She couldn't answer me. She said she didn't know, and she couldn't answer that question. I should have got tissues ready. I should have known I was gonna cry. I used to cry all the time, and then because I stopped thinking about it, then I didn't cry as much, and it only happens every now and again because I don't let myself hurt anymore. So yeah, the worst part was that it was on a Friday and there was nothing they could do until the next week, and she made a referral to fetal medicine. I can't talk. She made a referral to fetal medicine in Leeds, and so we went there the next week. I don't know if it was the Monday or the Tuesday. That was an awful appointment. That was the day when we really got the answers. There's no other way of saying, but the consultant was a bit of a twat, basically. I can think of other words, but I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be saying them on here. Yeah, so he basically told us that she was not compatible with life, that she was highly unlikely to survive. He couldn't give a diagnosis. He hadn't really seen anything like it before. He said that her kidneys, he kind of confirmed everything that the other sonographer had said, that the kidneys were abnormally small, her body like disproportionately small even with her body size, which was then super small as well. She was measuring about 5 to 6 weeks behind. There was zero fluid. Her lungs were like really small as well, and they offered me termination, and they offered to do it there and then. And he basically gave us the option that if we wanted to go away and think about it, we had until 22 weeks to do abortion one way. After 22 weeks they would still do it, but they would do it from 22 weeks onwards. They would do it by putting a needle through my stomach and directly into her heart. And so we always knew that if we were ever going to go down that route, no way were we doing it after 22 weeks. No way were we ever doing that to her. It was just, I was shocked to even know that that's how they did it, and I was shocked that they were even offering me a termination at that stage in pregnancy. And the thing that really broke my heart was he was offering that to me as after he'd scanned me, and I was lying on the bed and I could feel her moving, and he's talking about taking her away and taking her life away. We had a few more appointments at Leeds, and I regret that we wasted so much time with them, and he just never seemed very compassionate. Every time he would talk about termination, and the one, like, I get really excited about learning new words, and I know that sounds like such a nerdy thing to do, but there's one word that I learned in this pregnancy that I wish I'd never learned. And he kept talking about palliation, and palliative care, and I didn't know what he was talking about. I'd never heard that word before, and so I remember after one of the appointments I had to go home and Google that one night, and then I realised what he was implying. His other option was to continue the pregnancy, and when I went into labour, to deliver naturally at my local hospital, where, because there's no fluid, the contractions would have compressed the cord, and so it was virtually not going to happen that she was going to be born alive. And if she was miraculously born alive, that's when basically he's talking about palliative care and basically just holding her until she passes away in our arms. He never ever wanted to try, and just he gave up on her before even trying, and never even tried to find answers for us. He never tried to find out what was wrong with her. I actually became a really strong person, and I know you, especially because I've got mental health, a lot of people expected this situation to break me, and instead I actually found strength by the fact that I realised she was depending on me and I needed to find answers, and so I drove myself crazy with researching and trying to find things to discuss with him, and he just didn't want to entertain anything I had to say, and he literally tried to quote medical journals and baffle me with medical jargon that he knew I didn't understand, and he was just, I just couldn't deal with that, and I asked for a second opinion. So I'm not very good at geography, but I'm glad at the choice that I made, because it's now also a hospital that we're choosing to stick with for this pregnancy as well. But he asked where I would like to get a second opinion, and I could go anywhere in the country. I don't know how far away places are, but I just came up randomly with Newcastle and said, you know, because I just thought, well, that doesn't seem too far away. Manchester was like a 3-hour journey, I knew that, and I knew that Newcastle was maybe 2 hours. So I said Newcastle, I want to go to Newcastle for my second opinion, and he was happy with that, and it is the best decision we ever made. And you're probably thinking, you know, why is that a good decision? You still lost your baby. But I think it makes a big difference the way people at least try, and that's the one thing that Newcastle did. So it was the RVI hospital, and I had this amazing consultant, Professor Robson, and he actually talked to us on a level of respect, and he never made us feel stupid for asking questions. And when I gave him all the research that I'd found, he would explain to me why it wasn't maybe appropriate to try that treatment, or why it was too late, which is why I regret wasting so much time with leads. But at least he tried everything, and we basically did all the tests that you could think of. So I had an MRI scan of my belly, of my bump, which was just a strange experience. I didn't even know that you could have that. I had a CVS test, which is kind of like an amniocentesis, but the only difference is they put a really thick needle in, I think, and put a swab down through this needle, and it swabs the placenta. And it was only then, by them doing that, that they were able to tell us the gender. So we had picked out actually a name, a girl and a boy name, and her boy name was going to be Avery Alexander. Avery is just a name I really like. Alexander is Fabian's middle name, and then obviously we had the name Silver Rose, which was her name. So the CVS actually showed that there was nothing that they could detect chromosome wise that was abnormal, and the results that we got back from the MRI scan basically said this woman that had analysed these results, she said she'd been doing this sort of thing for like 16 years, and in all her 16 years she'd never seen such an abnormal placenta. Unfortunately, apart from that, and just seeing that she was a very poorly baby. It didn't really give us any answers, and so we made the plan that we would give everything we could for Silver, and our aim was to get to 34 weeks, and we knew that the only way she was going to be born alive was through C-section. I was aware that it would impact my womb and my future pregnancies, but I honestly, like, I'm afraid of needles and stuff. I'm considering that I had the CVS test, like, it was just a no-brainer. I was happy to have a C-section. I would have done anything to make sure she was born alive, and it just so happened that at 32 plus 6 we had stayed overnight in Newcastle the night before because we had an 8 AM appointment, I think it was, and over that night the movement had reduced. So I mentioned that to the professor in the morning, and despite the scan actually being okay and everything, he decided to admit me to the day unit, where I got hooked up with the monitor and I would press the button every time she moved, so then they knew kind of the heart rate and how it was correlating with movements and stuff. And by the end of the day, somehow the readings were not good. I can't remember, there was numbers that they wanted them to be and they just weren't there, and it just got to the point they realised she was better out than in and they really needed to get her out. So I went. It was kind of, it had originally been a planned C-section, but it turned into more of an emergency C-section, and I had her that night at, I honestly don't know, like maybe just before 10 o'clock at night, and I can't tell you how glad I am that I went through that surgery and made sure she was born alive. She was born severely anemic. There was actually a risk, there was a pocket of blood behind my placenta as well, and they didn't know what that was, and they were concerned that I was going to hemorrhage, which thankfully I didn't. So I was safe, and despite her being unexpectedly anemic and she needed blood transfusions and a lot of CPR, they managed to stabilise her in theatre, and they then allowed her to come over to me for literally a split second. I got to see her and she was just this most beautiful little thing. And then they took her to special care baby unit, to the neonatal intensive care unit. And I can't tell you how much of an agonising wait it was until I saw her again. And a song that was playing in theatre when they were actually sewing me back up and like then sorting out moving me onto the bed was Christina Perri, Jar of Hearts, and it's one that I always associate with Silver now. And then I was taken to the recovery area, and just that agonising wait of them. They basically wanted me to have regained feeling, and this woman kept coming and spraying me with free spray to check if I was feeling stuff. And I think Fabian did actually go to see her and he left me for a little bit, which is, I'm a very anxious person and I'm not very good at being left on my own, but that was one of them moments when we needed to make the most of any moment that she was alive and stuff. So while she was stable, Fabian got to go see her before me, and then thankfully at God knows what time in the morning, it could have been maybe 2, 3 in the morning, I finally got to go and see her. They wheeled me in on the bed and I had to try and rearrange stuff in the little room. There was 4 incubators and then this huge bed that I was on, and I'm like trying to reach over. It was just so hard because I literally just had surgery, could barely move, and I'm trying to reach over from this huge bed to be able to touch her and touch her soft little warm body. And they gave me and her these mini boos, which I'll show you. So it was this, and I still have it now that I sometimes snuggle, and it was funded by the charity Tiny Lives, which is based at the RVI. We basically had one each, and throughout her entire stay at Skaboo in NICU, we would swap these every time I would go see her. I would swap, and so we would have the scent of each other, and it doesn't really smell like her now, but it's just still precious to know that this was with her when she was alive, because obviously I don't have memories of her being alive in this house, so to have items like this are really special to me. So I guess moving on, the next day I had been unwell during the night. I had reacted not very well to the medications that they'd put in me, because they give you like antibiotics and stuff during surgery, so I had to beg and plead, and I had to have all tests and stuff to make sure I was safe to go and see Silver. I don't want to go into too much detail necessarily about her life, because obviously this is her baby loss story and I don't want to make this video too long, but you can see videos of her life in a different video that I will link up above, and it's a video that I actually played at her funeral. To sum it up, those 16 days were so precious, and she did so well. There was one day that I remember, it was a few days in, quite early on, and they took us aside and said, you know, we're going back to hours now, and we don't have days, we have hours. And she's really been a bit funny, and she pulled through, and we were so lucky to get to know her and her personality, and she was a little feisty thing, considering she was, I think she was 870 grams or 890, I always get them muddled, but she was such a tiny little thing and had such a big personality, and each day we just fell more and more in love with her, and she started to do better. She started at the beginning of her life on high levels of, I think it was nitrogen or nitrous oxide or something, and within a week she was completely off, and she was on this, like, it's like a wobble, I think they call it an oscillator, and it wobbles to help her lungs. She came off that, and she was, even when she had surgery, she actually had surgery, considering how small she was. She had surgery because she wasn't pooping at all. She hadn't pooped, and it was like over a week, and basically they had concerns that she had a blockage, or there was something else that they were concerned that was going on. So she had a surgery to have a stoma fitted, and even on the way back from that surgery she was showing off and was on room air and not needing oxygen at all. Like, that was just amazing. She was doing so well. She did obviously have difficulties as well. She did keep having, I think they were called pneumothorax, and it's where the lungs, there's so much pressure in the lungs that they are punctured, and then she kept having to have chest drains, which made it really painful for her, and so she was on a lot of heavy pain medication and was unable to come out for cuddles as much as we were desperate for cuddles. But she did get to come out on her little tray in her nest, and we did get to stroke her and kiss her, and like we got to put a hat on her, and just, we actually got very involved in her care. We were the ones that would change her nappy. We got to give her oral mouth care, so we got to put my express milk onto a cotton bud and give her the milk on her tongue, which was just nice for her to have that positive association with us, and to just have something positive in that just alien environment for her. I was really lucky that on the 15th day she was finally well enough to come out for cuddles. I still remember, I kept thinking that she looked like the size of a guinea pig, and I know that's a really weird thing to say, and then when they put her on me I was like shocked that she was actually so small, even compared to like a guinea pig, because I've had pet guinea pigs and I kind of knew, and she looked like that size, but she was so small, and she was just this little baby nestled on my chest, and she was just had her arms splayed out and was just cuddling me. And I think I was just so shocked and didn't know how to feel in that moment, that it's almost like I didn't fully get to enjoy it, because I'd kind of convinced myself it was never gonna happen, and I was never gonna get them sort of moments, and I wish I could go back and just really embrace it and just relive that moment again. And we were actually lucky at this point that we were living in a charity funded house. It was actually like this huge house that's in the car park, like this really old almost like Victorian style building, and it was funded by the Sick Children's Trust. And by that point we'd only just brought Beau up to live with us, because it was getting to the point my mum and dad had had him for nearly 2 weeks, and so he came up to live with us. We honestly thought Silver was doing so well that we were kind of prepared to be in Newcastle for the long term. I remember we had plans to go swimming in Newcastle. We were looking at things that we could do in Newcastle with Beau, and I was doing crafts and stuff with him. And yeah, that night he had gone to sleep in the little cot, and the awkward thing was, because Beau was there, it meant we always had to take it in turns. It was just really difficult to take Beau with us to see Silver, especially when it was like doing her cares, which was her nappy change and stuff, and they were done every 6 hours, so it would be done at midnight. So obviously we would have taken it in turns to do that, and so I didn't do the midnight cares that night because I'd already had cuddles, and so it was Fabian that went to do her cares that night and spend some time with her and just sit with her. And I know he went through a lot of difficulty after losing her. He kept like thinking that it was his fault, that he'd done something wrong, and it never was. And he left her at about 1 in the morning, and he came back, and I'd been hand expressing my milk, and we'd put the milk in the fridge, and then we were just about to settle to sleep. I was literally just about falling asleep, and the phone rang, and it was about 3 in the morning by this point, and I knew. I just knew. Like they always say, if you get a phone call during the night, it's never something good. And they asked us to come in. I've never like got dressed so fast, and we picked Beau out of his little travel cot, half asleep, ran across the car park, and at this point it was the Beast of the East, the big storm that came with all the snow, and so we were running across this car park as it was snowing, running as fast as we could. And we went in the lift to go upstairs, got into Skaboo, and we thought it was odd that none of the other rooms had nurses in. And then you got to our room. I've never seen so many people in one room. And a nurse came out and immediately took Beau, and they took him and they looked after him. And we went in. It was like she was already gone. You could just see. Like, you know when people faint and people say, you know, the colour drains out of your face? Well, it was kind of like that. Like, she'd always had colour in her cheeks and stuff, but not this time. This time she was so pale. She hadn't passed away yet. But she was so pale. And they said, we've got minutes. I've never had such a physical response to something. And throughout that whole night, like my stomach, I was really unwell, and I had the worst heartburn I've ever felt, and it got to the point I had to ask the nurses if they could find Gaviscon or like antacid or something, and they had to get it off one of the children's wards just to medicate me enough to be by her bedside. And she had all sorts done to her that night. They actually gave her medication to paralyse her so that they couldn't work on her, so that she wasn't flailing her arms around, that they could do things to her. They did CPR, they put chest drains back in, they gave her different medications, they tried everything. And I just prayed and prayed that this was going to be another one of them times when she then suddenly started doing really well and showing off again. And boy, I just knew. So at one point I think she did stabilise a little bit, and they let us go and try and get some sleep in one of their special parents' rooms that was actually on the ward. We had actually phoned for my parents to come up, which was obviously a 2-hour journey, but with the snow and stuff, and we didn't know whether they were going to make it in time. I was so exhausted, and I remember falling asleep in that room, and then the nurse came back in not long later and said, no, you need to come back. And it just kept changing. 1 minute she wasn't too bad, and then she was minutes again. We were really lucky that my mum and dad actually got to be there before she passed away. It just got to the point where the doctor said, there's nothing more I can do, and you can leave her in the incubator and just hope and pray, but there is a good chance she's going to pass away, and she's going to pass away in an incubator on her own, or you can get her out and surround her with love and cuddle her, and we can turn the machines off. Like, I don't mean like turn them off like the life support or anything, I mean like turn off the screen, so we're not focusing on the numbers, because they were just not good numbers and there was no point, just keep watching them, and to just not have the bleeping all the time. And I think we just got to the point we couldn't bear to think of her dying in the incubator on her own, and so we did get her out for cuddles, and she was still on breathing support, she was still alive, and she was in her little nest. And I think one of the most amazing things is, despite the fact that she had been paralysed when she was with us, this is when I think that babies recognise voices and recognise people, and she knew that we were there, and she opened her eyes and looked at us. So we made sure that my mum and dad got to have cuddles too, because they never had cuddles, and even Fabian. I was the only one that actually had a cuddle with her earlier the day before that was a positive cuddle when she was well, and so we made sure everybody had cuddles. But we didn't want him to see her like that, and he'd already seen her and stuff when she was well, so we didn't bring him in for that. And it just got to the point me and Fabian spoke with one another, and like Fabian says, he feels like his mind was made up when he felt a cold shoulder on his hand but no one was there, and he thinks it was his nana. And so we kind of spoke about it and decided that we needed to let her go, and we needed to just take away the pain, and we felt that it was the right time. So they changed her breathing tubes or something, so that it was a thing where they like kept putting their finger over it, and Fabian carried her while they were still supporting her breathing, and we went into the quiet room, I think that's what it was called, and we sat there for a while and just had her like sat on the sofa. And then I think we just, after maybe 10-15 minutes, we just knew it was time, and we both agreed together and said that they could take the tubes out. And that was the last time she took a breath, was when they were supporting her, and then she just slipped away. We were actually really lucky with the storm, with the Beast of the East, because it meant that actually like not a lot of staff could get in over the next few days, so we got a lot longer with her, and we had her in a cold cot, and Bo did then get to like stroke her and cuddle her once she'd, you know, and we got like a family photo together. And we were really lucky that a charity called Remember My Baby came, and they did this free photo shoot and took these beautiful special family pictures for us that I've actually only just recently printed it off one of my favourite pictures and put it on her shelf. The day that she passed away, on that morning, we were so exhausted that after a couple of hours of her being passed away, we left my parents and Fabian's mum babysitting her, for I guess a nice way of putting it, in the quiet room, and me and Fabian went and just crashed, absolutely crashed on the bed. Like, normally I don't sleep very well like close to him, but I think that was one of the first times in a really long time we were so exhausted, and we fell asleep in each other's arms that morning. And then when we woke up, we went and spent time with her. The staff were amazing because they always treated her like a human. They still treated her almost like she was still alive. They still spoke to her, they still spoke about her as if she was still there, and it made such a big difference. And I don't know that we would have got that at Leeds Hospital. I'm not saying that we wouldn't, but they were just amazing. And so they helped us bath her that day. Okay, so my parents just brought the kids back and I kind of got interrupted filming, but on the upside, at least that's just given me a chance to compose myself a little bit. If I try and remember what I was talking about before, I was telling you a bit about what happened after she passed away, and that on the day that she had passed away, we actually then got the opportunity to bath her with the help of the neonatal nurse, and they really helped treat her as she was still a real human, which obviously she was. Yeah, just the way that they looked after her really meant the world to us, and they helped us create memories. We have about 4 memory boxes actually. We have the towel that we dried her in, we have the shampoo bottle and the body wash bottle that we had a choice from their cupboard of what they had, and they had either Asda's ones or they had, I think it was like Johnson's baby wash and stuff. So we went with the Asda ones, and I actually have since bought several more bottles of that stuff, that whenever I'm struggling I do like to smell it, and I like to know that, like in the past I have had baths with it, so I can just smell her, because that's kind of how I remember her, is the smell of what we washed her in, which the towel doesn't really smell that much of her, I don't think, anymore. We have so many things from her life. We have her little blood pressure cuff, which, my god, is the tiniest little thing when you think of like putting one around our arms, and I don't know, did hers go around her arm? I just know it was so tiny. And I think we have, I don't know if it was her arm or I think it was her leg. We have like a thing that kept her leg straight, I think, and we have the thing that went on her foot that would check her heart rate, I think. We have the little mask that she would wear, because obviously her eyes were still underdeveloped because she was so small and being in a bright room. I mean, most of the time the incubator was covered and to mimic a womb, but if we ever did lift it up, she would have a little mask on her eyes. So we have that, which is super tiny. They helped us create little key rings with her hair in, which I found really difficult. Like cutting her hair like that really upset me, and I found that really difficult. We took loads and loads of handprints that were, it was like they would wipe her hand with this, like, it was clear stuff, and then whenever the chemical reaction on the paper would come up with this dark handprint. And they also did some handprints in clay for us, which apparently they would have to press quite hard to do that, so they actually did that when we were not in the room. They said it can be quite unpleasant to see, especially with her being so small. But we had 5 days of just bonding with her even more. I guess just the freedom to be able to hold her and stuff and be able to pick her up. It just gave us that opportunity to have a sense of normality, a chance to hold her when she didn't have tubes in her mouth and stuff. And like I say, we were really lucky that the postmortem people couldn't actually get into the hospital because the roads and weather was so bad. I still remember, I think it was the night after that day where she'd passed away, I remember going for a walk through the hospital. We always asked them to stay with her and babysit her, and they would check on her and stuff, because to us it was just hard to walk away. It was it's not natural to have a baby and then leave it unattended, and so they would look after her for us. If we needed to just go for a walk to get some food, we would always go downstairs to Costa and get a chai tea latte. That's one of the things I associate with her. So like for her first birthday, her birthday cake was actually chai tea flavoured. And yeah, I just remember that first night walking, and there was like an area where you get from one side of the hospital to the other, and you look down on this courtyard. I've never seen anybody in this courtyard, so I don't know if you can even go. It looks like a beautiful place that if you were poorly it would be a nice place to go. And I just remember looking at this freshly laid snow, and it just was so calm and serene and beautiful. And so every year I kind of dread snow coming, because it's a reminder of losing her, but at the same time it's almost like it brings me comfort, and it just makes me feel closer to her. It's something that I really associate with her, is snow, and it just reminds me of that peaceful feeling of when I guess we knew that she was at peace, even though it was breaking us, and just seeing that scene. So I really look forward to that each year, and it seems like ever since then it never wants to snow very much. As much as I don't like to dwell on the loss, I like to remember her in a way that I'm making connections with things, and it brings me comfort when maybe that song comes on, or I hear or see something and it reminds me of her. It was so difficult walking away from that hospital like 5 days later with no baby, and we just had boxes. That's a feeling that I will never forget, is walking away with boxes. Especially when walking through the hospital I saw people that were taking their newborn babies home. I can't tell you how through my rainbow pregnancy and even through this pregnancy, that is one of the biggest things. That's all I want, just to have that experience of walking out of hospital with a living baby, and that's all I want, because it got taken away from me that time. It's just one of the worst things you can ever experience, and you'll experience that whether you've had a NICU loss, whether you've had a stillbirth, a miscarriage, you're still going to have that experience. I guess that's one universal part of baby loss that we all have experienced, and pregnancy after loss, that's the only thing that you really want, is to be able to take a healthy baby out of that hospital. So I guess that's pretty much it for Silver Rose's story in terms of my baby loss story. The postmortem that we had, the doctor, the neonatal doctor, was actually really kind enough to come down from Newcastle to where we live and deliver us the postmortem results in person, and we basically got told that she passed away due to pulmonary hyperplasia, which is incredibly small lungs that were just not able to function. And I'm not sure if it was dysplastic or polycystic kidneys, but basically her kidneys were covered in cysts, but they were not linked with a disease specific to kidneys that is a known disease. Every genetic test that they did came back completely normal. They never had any answers of what on earth went wrong with her, which is the hardest part, especially with our last pregnancy, because we just had no idea whether it was we were actually told if it's a genetic thing, there is a 1 in 4 chance it's going to happen again, but they couldn't tell us, because if it was a genetic thing, it's a disease that has not been identified yet. It's not a known disease, and I guess we're just lucky that so far, like this baby, I'm 25 weeks now, so obviously this baby has shown no symptoms. This baby is actually measuring quite big compared to Silver was 5 weeks behind. Our last baby, she did have growth problems, our Rainbow, but apart from that, she had no health issues and it was just a very anxious pregnancy, worrying about the what if. But like I say, we did not get a diagnosis, we got no answers, and I don't know if we ever will. We have got the option to work with a renal consultant in Newcastle, which we might do, and he might be able to give us some answers, so at least we know further on in the line if it's going to affect our children's fertility and their issues. But there is a good chance that this will be our last child, so if that is the case, as long as we have a healthy, happy pregnancy this time and bring a baby home, I don't think it's something that we're desperate to find out really anymore. Whereas at one point we were just desperate for answers, but I'm just so grateful for the children that I do have. But I think that is pretty much everything for this video. It is probably, when I upload this, Baby Loss Awareness Week. I will link some information down below for support that you can access and more information on Baby Loss Awareness Week. And I really appreciate you sticking till the end and watching this video and listening to my story of baby loss and the life of little Silver Rose.
You said night